Friends, very good to have you join us again. James, very nice to see you.
Very good to see you, Ian, and Happy New Year to you.
Are we still allowed to say Happy New Year? Because
I don't know because it's kind of it's how there's a big debate about this, isn't there?
there is, I know. We almost could yesterday still say Happy Christmas, but that moment is
Yeah,
gone.
yeah, but all the decorations sort of come down now. So
They have indeed, indeed. But of course, that just it does indicate that the time lag between us recording and this.
yeah, indeed,
So
indeed.
we're giving the
Yeah,
game away here, aren't we? So
yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
yeah.
revealing the
Oh,
secrets.
but well, New Year, new resolutions. James, I think we want to invite our viewers and listeners to make
Yes.
more resolutions this year, don't we?
Yeah, 4 resolutions. We would love you to resolve to like the videos.
Thank you very much. Big thumbs
We
up.
would love you to resolve to subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
We would love you to resolve to share on the social media.
On the social media, yes.
And we'd love you to resolve to comment when you've got something you feel you'd like to say.
Oh, yeah, and we do get some debates going from time to time, so
Yeah.
that'd be really good.
Mm.
I was going to say something vaguely witty then, but it's gone now. So perhaps we just go back straight to the Bible reading. So
Yeah, let's do that, shall we? So
well,
it's
the only thing I was going to say is that look how easy it is there. Just do that, and you've already ticked off 4 of your resolutions for the year. So
yeah, quite. I mean, it
fantastic.
couldn't be easier, could it really?
No, it really couldn't. No, that's
Anyway, we're on the second Sunday of Epiphany.
we are.
And we are in John's Gospel, John chapter 1.
Or as I tend to say, the fourth gospel.
Fourth Gospel, but John chapter 1, 43 to 51.
And by the way, we again, even if we are going to use the names which we can't be certain of in terms of authorship, we really should be following the discipline of the Greek New Testament, which is they don't say the gospel of so and so as if it belongs to them, but it's the gospel according to. In other words, it's their perspective on the gospel. And we do talk about that quite a lot, really, don't we?
We do tend to go on about it, especially when we're in John on the fourth gospel. Exactly. It's kind of that's good the way it is. So yeah,
point made.
Mm.
Good. Did you mention the passage?
I did. It's John 1, 43 to 51.
Now I've called this the call of Nathanael because that's where the passage ends up with Jesus' encounter with Nathanael. You want to propose something different?
Yeah, I do. I'd like to surmise there's really the call of Philip, because I mean, what you actually have in the very first verse of the passage is Jesus finds Philip and says to him, "Follow me." Now that looks like a call of Philip to me, and it's Philip's ministry which begins to open up here, which is a theme throughout the fourth gospel. And we discover Philip, who really has this extraordinary gift of evangelism. He's also somebody, he's somebody who brings others, often to Andrew, actually, but then Andrew brings them to Jesus. So there's this kind of stepping stones to faith, which is fantastic. And so this incident with Nathanael entirely comes out of Philip's obedience as an evangelist, and I think also, as we'll see in a moment, his copying of Jesus.
Yes, indeed.
So it's fascinating.
And what's really interesting is that when we were just preparing for this, I said to you, why on earth have we got this reading in Epiphany? And then, of course, you pointed out the reason, which is precisely that.
Yeah, revealing that Jesus to somebody. Yeah, which is.
And in fact, it's revealing Jesus to a particular group of people in a particular way, which I think will come out as we deal with text. But before we plunge into detail of the text, I think there's something else we need to observe about the shape of this passage. So I'm just going to do a quick screen share, if I can press the right buttons. I've got it here. There you go. Share that. So I hope you can see that. Now, this is just really interesting. I mentioned this when I wrote the article on this passage. Because again, obviously, inevitably with the lectionary, we're sort of cutting in and taking a little chunk here. But what is fascinating is the way that, following on from the testimony of John the Baptist, where he testifies that he saw the Spirit come down on him like a dove, even though the fourth gospel doesn't mention Jesus' baptism at all, it just obviously alludes to that. It assumes that we know the story, so these points fit in. And then you get in the immediately preceding verses from 35 to 42, you get this sequence of events. You get Andrew and Peter, also from Bethsaida.
Yeah.
Worth noting, isn't it, that the name Andrew is a Greek name, and Philippos, lover of horses,
is also a Greek name. Yeah. Yeah.
Peter, well, Simon is a Hebrew name, Jewish name, but then Simon gets called Peter, which is a Greek name, and he's introduced as Peter. So you get Simon and Andrew and Peter from Bethsaida. Interestingly, the two disciples find and follow Jesus, or two disciples, one of whom is Andrew, find and follow Jesus.
Yes.
Jesus then says, come and see, to the two of them. Andrew says to Peter, oh, there you've got that chain going on again, haven't you?
Yes.
Andrew says to Peter, we found the Messiah.
Yes.
He's called Simon Peter the Rock. Simon Peter the Rock. So that's that sequence of events in the previous verses. I don't know if I've said that very clearly or coherently.
Well, yeah, no, but I think the table lays it out very helpfully, doesn't it?
It does. I didn't really need to go through that, did I?
It's absolutely a parallel what's going on here, and I think particularly interesting is the way in which Nathanael just echoes Philip echoes the words of Jesus to Nathanael, "Come and see," which is, and this whole thing, we have found the Messiah, is also this.
Yes, that's echoed. Yeah,
I mean, clearly that's the news of the early disciples. We found the Messiah. This is absolutely within their Jewish context.
Yes.
Completely makes sense that this hope and expectation is being fulfilled in this person who we found.
One of the best summaries, you may have another one. One of the best summaries of messianic expectation that I found is, of course, Tom Wright in the New Testament of the People of God. He's got, I think it's chapter 10, where he talks about the hope of Israel, and he teases out the different dynamics. I mean, obviously, there isn't just one Judaism in the New Testament period. There are multiple Judaisms.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. He just tabulate what some of those messianic expectations are, and of course, then you've got this paradox within the Synoptic Gospels where John the Baptist sends his disciples to say, "Are you the one who was to come, or should we expect another?" So interesting that Jesus doesn't fulfill all those expectations in the way that they'd hoped.
No, he's constantly kind of adjusting people's expectations, really, isn't he?
Now, out of this table, I think the thing that has struck me most clearly is, first of all, the switching of what goes on. So in the first set of actions, it's the two disciples, one of whom is Andrew, seek out Jesus. But in the second part, it's Jesus seeking out Philip. Now, I just think that's really helpful, because it seems to me that some people's experiences of having sought out Jesus or sought out meaning and found Jesus. But, in my experience, for instance, I didn't think I was looking for anything. And I'm much more like a Philip, where it felt as though Jesus was seeking out me.
Yes, and people do talk in both these ways, don't they? It's really quite distinctive, actually, when you talk to people about their testimony, whether they talk in one way or the other. I suppose my reflection on that within the fourth gospel is that ultimately what Jesus says to all the disciples is, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." And that, of course, is the common denominator of however we've come into relationship with Jesus, whatever it's felt like, whether we've been seeking or we felt sought. But it is interesting that these both seem to be entirely normal ways of people coming to faith. Yeah.
But then, as you say, Jesus's language to the disciples is, "Come and see." And now Philip borrows Jesus's language as a way of inviting Nathanael.
That sort of one-to-one relationship of the master and the disciple, absolutely precisely copying what the master does, is a fantastic model of discipleship, isn't it? And so crucial.
And that's I actually remember this morning. You can tell what day we're recording. I was presiding at communion, and we did talk about this theme of invitation. So actually, the whole point about the coming into community, gathering around the table, is we come because we're invited. Draw near with faith. Draw near. Come. Jesus has invited us with faith. Come and put our trust in him. Therefore, our task when we're sent out is to say to other people, "You come and see. Come and hear the invitation as well yourself." In a sense, all our outreach is simply just doing to others what's been done to us.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, within that, telling our story of what was done to us, what we call testimony, just perfectly normal and far more powerful than we often think. People are reticent, aren't they, to tell their own story? But actually, as soon as somebody else tells their story, you think, "Oh, that's actually a bit like my story." So this is this is how it happens, isn't it? And we have that connection.
So there we go. So it's already some quite big themes coming out just from looking at those parallels. And then if we'd actually look at the passage and the details here. Now we're going to find this thing. We've done this before when we've sort of dipped into the fourth gospel, where we suddenly find there's these extraordinary paradoxes where there's some very realist effects and detail and geography and timing on the one hand, and on the other hand, all these details, particularly the specific real, what's the reality effect details,
Yeah.
seem to always have this spiritual significance as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, here we are in Galilee. Most of the fourth gospel is located in Judea,
Jerusalem,
ne-
yeah.
in Jerusalem, and we have these details about Bethsaida. We
Yes,
then discover,
yes,
I mean, later that Nathanael's from Cana.
yeah.
It's not far
Yes, we
away.
do later. We're not told that now.
No, we're not told that now because we find it out in chapter 21, I think.
And then we go,
Resurrection.
okay, now I can
Right.
see why you have the encounter with Nathanael, and then chapter 2, the wedding at Cana.
Yeah,
There's a
absolutely,
connection.
completely makes sense. They're only 6 miles away from each other, so it's
Yeah.
it's not it's a brief walk. Yeah, and so all these particular details, which really show us just how the story of Jesus, which is cosmic,
Yes.
is played out in the particularities of real human life
Yeah.
encounter
Yeah.
and all the rest of it, and it cannot therefore be spiritualized away.
No.
It's something that's much closer and more real than that. So.
One of the things that the fourth gospel is very interested in is sequences of time. And on the one hand, again, going to the reality, it's much more realistic that Jesus goes to Jerusalem for the festivals 3 times. So when you say to people, how long was Jesus' ministry? They always say, oh, it's 3 years. Well, how do you know that? You know that from the fourth gospel. It's the fourth gospel that tells you the history. And yet here you've got this temporal marker, the next day, and then we get the next day, then we get the next day. And then we get on the third day, which is in Cana. Of course, the language of the third day has all this significance. But of course, you've then counted through 7 days. So it's almost as if, just in the same way that Matthew, the gospel according to Matthew, uses in the beginning that he echoes Genesis.
Yeah.
Here, again, you've got the beginning of the echo. In the beginning, there was a word. And then you have this sort of week of new creation of Jesus' ministry.
Yes. Yes, you have this absolutely, and of course that week of creation is also then echoed at the other end of the gospel with the week of the new creation on the resurrection day. So it's all overlaid with meaning, which is marvelous. Yeah.
Now, here's a little interesting thing about Philip coming from Bethsaida. So again, we can look at the geography, and Bethsaida is really significant because it's just across the Jordan, and it's on the boundary between Philip the Tetrarch's territory and Herod.
Yeah.
Have I got that right? Yes.
Herod Antipas.
Herod Antipas, that's right. Who's the one who threatens John the Baptist, of course.
Yeah.
But here's the other really interesting thing. Where did the feeding of the 5,000 take place?
Oh, it took place outside Bethsaida.
Yes, it did. How do we know that, though?
I don't know, but I think you're going to tell me.
Well, I think I am. We know it from Luke and from Mark, from Luke 9 and Mark 6.
Oh, yeah.
Both mention Bethsaida as the place they go to after the feeding of the 5,000.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing. In John 6, because the feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle that's recorded in all 4 Gospels. So in the feeding of the 5,000, whom does Jesus ask where they can find bread?
He asked Philip.
He asked Philip. Why does he ask Philip? Because we know
Philip's
from
a local
the
boy.
Gospel, Philip's from Bethsaida.
Yeah.
But we only know from Luke and Mark
Yes.
the feeding of 5,000 happened. John 6 doesn't mention this.
Yes, that's a glorious interplay, isn't it? Between
it is.
So
either the authors have been incredibly clever in cross-referencing this, or they're all recording the same event and they're being faithful to what happened.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm inclined to think it's a second.
Indeed.
So there we go. Okay, so Philip's in Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, now this is fascinating, isn't it?
Yes.
We found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote.
Yeah.
Which is the law and the prophets is the sort of standard way of talking about the scriptures. So we find this phrase on the lips of Jesus. But this is fascinating, isn't it? That they read the law and the prophets and decide it's actually pointing to someone else, that on their own they're incomplete.
Yes.
Here we are. He's the person who fulfills all this.
Yes, and David Ford makes a really interesting comment here in his commentary that this community of disciples is founded both on the scriptures and on experiences. So people do stuff, but they do it in relation to being a scriptural community. So their whole worldview is the worldview of Scripture, and they're coming and they're seeing and they're listening and they're hearing and they're finding and all the rest of it. So this is something which is fundamental, I think, isn't it, to the Christian community, that we absolutely take the worldview of the scriptures
Yes.
central, but we have to live it out.
Yes, although of course here, of course, it isn't just experience in general; it's the experience of encountering Jesus, isn't it?
It's absolutely no, and that's what I
Yeah.
think he's talking about. Yes, it's
Yeah.
not a sort of vague, or I've had this life experience. It's absolutely in relationship with Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get the interplay between the two, the encounter with Jesus and making sense of who Jesus is and what he does on one hand, and constantly going back and reading the scriptures on the other.
Exactly.
And that dynamic.
And
again, interesting, in a quite a different way. That's the same dynamic you find in Luke 24 in the road to Emmaus.
Road to Emmaus. Yeah, absolutely.
Where on the one hand, they saw him in the breaking of the bread, but on the other hand, their reflection is, oh, didn't the scriptures burn within us as he was talking?
Yeah.
As he was expanding the scriptures. So sorry, didn't our hearts burn within us as he was
talking? Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
And of course, we get this fantastic proverbial phrase where
and anything good come out of Nazareth.
Which of course we now use all the time. Can anything good come out of Chilwell? Can anything good come out of Histon or whatever?
Well, I say Bedford. That's my sort of stereotypical. Well, nobody ever admits to coming from Bedford. So I'm sure there'll be somebody from Bedford watching now. So, but there are these. They always have these things. And I remember hearing a very good sermon. Actually, you were probably there as well when Dougie Davis at Nottingham once gave a sermon on kind of thing could come out of Nazareth, and it was very memorable.
Oh, he did, yes.
Yeah, he makes you think. Yeah, but it's fascinating, isn't it, that although Nathanael says that, Philip doesn't sort of argue with him. He just says, "Come and see." He doesn't spend any time confronting Nathanael's prejudice.
No,
he just says, "Come and see."
Yeah,
come and find Jesus. Yeah.
A couple of really interesting things about this phrase, though, because he says Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph.
Yeah.
Again, you get this very specific emphasis on Jesus's human particularity, son of Joseph. This is one of only two occasions where Joseph is mentioned in the fourth gospel.
Yeah.
And the other one actually is interesting when Jesus is in dispute. And
then it's a way of putting him down, isn't it?
Yeah. See, but we know he's the son of Joseph. So how can he have come from heaven? And you get that exact contrast or juxtaposition of how is it that on the one hand, Jesus is human, has a human descent we know about, and on the other hand, claims to be the one who was sent from the Father.
Yeah.
And of course, that's exactly the juxtaposition you've got in this first chapter.
Yeah.
So the cosmic stuff and then the very, very human stuff. Yeah. I haven't commented on this before, I don't think, but one of the things I find really interesting about Nazareth is that on the one hand, again, you can look at the sort of geography and the history, and we know that at the time, obviously it's a big town now because of that's where Jesus came from, ironically. At the time, it was just an insignificant village. It's not, the name isn't even recorded before the first century, before these records in the Gospels. But here's the other interesting thing. There's now somebody will give the source in the comment here, or I might add it in. But one of the speculations about Nazareth is that it was a little community of people who are highly expectant of the one who is to come. The reason is that the name might well derive from netzer, which is the Hebrew for the branch. The prophetic word in Isaiah 11 about the branch coming.
Yes, netzer. Yes, of course.
So netzer is a term overladen with messianic expectation. So it may be that on the one hand, Nazareth was a little hotbed of religious expectation, but on the other hand, actually, in worldly terms, was insignificant.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So Jesus comes from this place of hope and faith and anticipation, but actually in human terms, it's just a nothing. It's just a nowhere place.
Yeah.
Lovely comment from William Temple, readings in John's Gospel, about Philip. So this is coming back to defending your theory again, isn't it?
Right.
As soon as he becomes a disciple, he also becomes a missionary.
Yes.
This is the only true discipleship.
Yeah. I like that.
And there's some great models of church growth. I forgot the name of the chap. It's his website is called Church Model Growth, where he says his theory about church growth is that churches grow when they have a small group of enthusiasts who just go and tell everybody about the faith. You won't expect all your congregation enthusiasts, but this enthusiasm only lasts a certain amount of time. So if your church is going to grow, what you need to do is you need to have a steady trickle of people coming to faith who themselves are enthusiasts, who invite others, and then they become the enthusiasts, and so it goes on. Yeah,
interesting. And then, of course, there's this wonderful comment, isn't there, of Jesus? Here is, he sees Nathanael coming towards him. He says, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit
or
or
guile, I think the
guile.
Authorized Version says.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, that's a wonderful quality, isn't it? To have
It,
no
it,
guile.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I think it's very interesting that use of the word, because in many, if you put it together with what happens at the end of the chapter,
Hmm.
with the vision of the Son of Man and the angels ascending and descending, which is clearly a reference to Jacob,
Of course.
then this is also this also could be seen as a reference to Jacob. Jesus, Jacob was famously deceitful,
Yes,
and
indeed.
and here Jesus is in a sense retelling the story of Jacob, the story of Israel,
Yes.
in relation to himself and to what's happening right here in front of Nathanael. And that's it's interesting. There's I think there's one other reference to Jacob in the fourth gospel, which of course is in the chapter 4.
Oh, yes, with the woman at the well, which is
The woman
Jacob's
at the
wife.
well. Our
Yeah.
father Jacob gave this, and Jesus says yes, but
Yeah.
something greater is here.
Yes, yeah, the greater than Jacob. Yeah.
So very interesting how the fourth gospel
Yes.
overlays that. Yeah,
And of course, at the Jabbok, he wrestles with God, and then that's when he gets the name Israel, which means one who wrestles with God. And,
yeah,
and of course, then the whole story for Jacob and for God's people is,
yeah,
will you receive the blessing and the call, the obligations that God calls you to, or will you be constantly fighting and striving and resisting?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Very interesting.
what they need, says Jeremiah and Ezekiel, is a new heart. And this
Yeah,
is what Jesus comes to
yeah,
bring. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I I mean on that whole thing about the story of Israel and Jesus
mm,
recapitulating that, I think that's confirmed by then this little exchange. Nathanael says to him, "How do you know me?" He perceives that Jesus has actually
yeah.
seen something about him. And of course, we do see this. We see the fact that he's already just seen something about Peter, and that with the woman at the well, also he
Mm.
has
You see
supernatural
something.
insight, yeah,
Mm,
into her life. Um, but then he said, Jesus says this thing, which I looks in the text, it looks incredibly enigmatic.
mm,
Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you.
mm,
And my sense is, in literal terms, we have no idea what that means. I mean,
mm.
was Nathaniel sitting under a fig tree? We don't know.
No.
But actually, of course, this has huge resonance with the whole narrative of the life of Israel,
Mm.
because the anticipation, I think it's in Micah chapter 4, the anticipation that when God brings peace to Israel, every man will sit under his own vine and his own
In
fig
its own
tree.
fig tree. Yeah.
So it's that motif of eschatological hope again.
Mm, mm.
And of course, taking that very literally, I have planted in my garden both a vine and a fig tree,
Of course you have. Yeah.
like, which I can go and sit under. We had got quite a nice crop of figs last
Is
year.
it particularly peaceful under them?
Being in my garden, I find particularly peaceful. The whole
Yeah.
garden.
Well, yeah. So
Mm.
yeah. But as you say, it is a stereotype of as it were within the scriptures
Yeah.
of the perfect contentment almost of Israel sitting under God and in obedience and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Do you think there's any significance to Nathaniel's name here? Because like the name Nathan here is quite common, isn't it, in English? But Natan
Mm,
means given, and of course El is God, so the name Nathaniel means given by God. So I don't know whether
mm.
there's any resonance
Yeah, I don't
with that
know.
whole sort of
It's
theme.
always tricky, that, isn't it? Because we come back to what we are saying at the beginning about the particularity, but the sort of cosmic significance of and the
Yeah,
symbols. It's
yeah.
it's it's a bit tricky to know that, but it does seem significant.
Some people conjecture that this is the disciple Bartholomew because
Yeah,
they're never mentioned the same
in the same sense,
thing
they're never
together.
seen in the same room at the same time.
No, I know there's a joke there somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah,
So
got to be.
never
Yeah.
seen together. And the fact, which is where we learn he was from Cana, was that in the episode in John 21 with the fishing on the lake,
Yeah,
Nathaniel's there, isn't he? So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
obviously quite a significant character.
yeah,
Um, Again, we get this mention. Nathaniel's response to him is Rabbi.
yeah.
Now, again, I think it's a fascinating thing. I really love this thing in terms of issues around mission, which is again, in the first half, which is parallel to this thought, again, they said Rabbi.
Yeah.
Now, then the author of the fourth gospel gives us a little
Yes.
comment in
Translates.
brackets, which being translated means teacher,
Teacher.
which it
Yeah.
doesn't strictly speaking. Rabbi means my great one, but of course,
Yeah.
it was a title given to people who
Teacher. Yeah.
teachers. But this is the verb methermeneuo. So if anyone complains about mentioning hermeneutics, I say, well, it's in the Bible.
Exactly. Yeah. Quite right.
But
Yeah.
here's the thing: these people with Greek names, but using Jewish language about Jesus
Yeah.
to other people with Greek names.
Yeah.
And they've come from a region, Bethsaida, which is on the boundary between Jew and
Yeah.
Gentile.
Yeah.
And to communicate the story, they've had to translate it from Hebrew and Aramaic into Greek.
Yeah.
And of course, the history of Christian mission is that translation and education always go hand in hand with mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is a cross-cultural movement. It's a all humanity movement. And it was from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Which I think is what's kind of being said here, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's also going from a minority culture to a majority culture. So it's not a power play.
No.
It's a story from the margins that's coming into the center.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because actually the final verse in verse 51, where we have this reference to the Jacob's ladder, the you suddenly becomes plural. I don't know if you noticed that in the Greek.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
So you once again you have this expansion into it's not just Nathanael in view now. It's something much more significant, I think.
By the way, that's a little feature again of the fourth gospel. In Jesus' encounter with Nicodemus in chapter 3, one of the puzzles is the way Jesus says I, then he says we speak of what we know.
Yeah.
And who's there with Jesus? I thought it was just the two of them.
Yeah.
It becomes a kind of corporate voice then, doesn't it?
Yes.
A communal voice.
Yes. There are
Yes.
I did read one other comment actually just on verse 51. I mean, we obviously think of it as the reference to Jacob, and obviously it must be Jacob's ladder, but there's also one commentator who sees it as a reference to Isaiah 64, oh that you would tear the heavens and come down, which I think we had it was in one of the readings in Advent actually this year. It's just this last year.
Oh, okay. Yes. People normally connect that with the baptism because heavens is what happens when the dove comes down, the heavens are torn open, the dove descends. And
but here again, you see the heaven open. So it's just an interesting. I don't think that allusion is as strong, but it may be there in the background. I don't know.
Yeah. And again, what we've got here is a very typical sort of midrashic thing where they'll mention the Son of Man, makes us think, oh, Daniel 7, but he's playing that into the account in Genesis of the ladder. And it depends on an ambiguity in the Hebrew text there, because the angels are ascending and descending on, and you could read the Hebrew as on it or on him.
Yes. Yeah.
On it, the ladder, or on him, Jacob.
Yeah.
And here Jesus is taking it, meaning in the personal sense, and he becomes the point of the heaven and earth. There's another really interesting observation about this language of seeing greater things. Do you believe this? You will see greater things. And of course, the big puzzle comes in John 14, I think. Oh, I'm improvising here, where Jesus says, you will do greater things than me. And of course, the whole big debate there, I've got an article about it. And the greater thing here is the fact it's not doing greater miracles, seeing more people healed. The greater thing is that heaven and earth are connected through Jesus' death on the cross, and that new life comes to those who are dead in their sin. That's the greater thing that he's going to see. And actually, I think this is a key to understanding what the greater things are about.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've just scooted over one little detail, though. You jumped me onto verse 51.
Oh,
when we were talking about Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel.
King of Israel.
Well, that's really significant, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
Are you going to say why, or should I?
No, well, you
I thought I'd just lob that up for you, James. There.
Thank you. No, you can hit it out of the park if you want to. We noticed it interestingly the other week with Matthew, didn't we?
You did. Well, the phrase comes once more, King of Israel, in John 12.
Yes.
But interestingly, this is the whole debate around the trial. So again, this is an example in the fourth gospel where he's just throwing a little nugget in, and you got to hold on to that and say, okay, see how that tracks with the story. Because if you look at the phrase King of Israel, then that's the debate Jesus' trial in the synoptic gospels. Are you the King of Israel? But also then it's very closely related to this title, King of the Jews. Which again is also the subject of debate. And well, of course, it relates to in Matthew, the Epiphany. Oh, the Epiphany in Matthew too, of course.
Yeah.
That's what you.
That's what I was referring to. Yeah.
Yours. That's right. So the Magi are looking for the King of Israel.
Jews,
And then Jesus has this debate with Pilate about, the King of the Jews, and are you the King of the Jews? Or you say so. And of course, it's then on the inscription over the cross, which both Synoptics and John agree on. So,
and I think these connections mean that actually the fourth gospel was written for you to read it over and over again, because every time you read it, you make more connections. That's how it works, isn't it?
You do. And it also has this sort of interesting, slightly less straightforward connection with the synoptics, because again, it's constantly assuming that you know the synoptics and that you're
Yeah,
reading it in the light of that as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
James, our time is up, but I just want to finish with just a little quotation, which I ended my article with. I'll republish the article after this video so people can put the two together. But it just picks up a whole series of the things that we've talked about. And my comment is this: this whole passage offers a wonderful picture of the dynamic interplay between the cosmic and the particular, the human and the divine. Jesus comes with supernatural knowledge and insight, and yet the testimony about him only spreads by means of the very human enthusiasm as one witness tells another about what they have seen and heard in their life-giving encounters with this man from God.
Very good.
Good place to finish, isn't it?
Yeah.
Friends, thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget to do those 4 things and, fulfill tick your list of New Year's resolutions off. So that's liking and subscribing and commenting and sharing with others. And James, thank you very much. What a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much.